Well, hello, everyone. We're going to just get right into it this week. We're going to talk about the question that is on everyone's mind, and is the national economy affecting the housing market here in Southern California? Let's get started. My name is Stephen Meade with Domicile Real Estate for people who love houses. This is our Southern California housing market update for March 11th, 2025. And obviously, we've seen quite a big number of market shifts on sort of the macroeconomic level, right? On that high economic level. We've got tariffs. We've got an inflation report coming out tomorrow that everyone is anxiously awaiting. We've got stock markets. Some people would say in turmoil, other people would say turbulent stock markets. We'll reserve judgment on that one. But how is that having an effect here in our local housing market? And what is that doing? And what do we think that's going to do depending on some of the outcomes? So, what I'd like to do is go ahead and jump into our slides and kind of weave in our presentation here, kind of what we have going on. So, let's go to the beginning. So, first off, we've got inventory growing. Now, as I've talked about multiple times, just because we have more inventory than we used to have does not mean we have a lot of inventory, right? This is for Los Angeles and Orange counties under $1 million. We've got, gosh, a little bit more, over maybe 6,500 or so active listings. That is a bit higher than we were at last year, maybe about 50% higher. And then on our 1 to 2 million category, that one might even be a little bit bigger of a percentage. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, because I think some of the big economic effects that we are seeing are having different effects depending on what segment of the market you are in, which is part of the reason why we have these graphs, right? Is to attempt to approximate and bifurcate that market so we can talk a little bit about those different ranges. So if we look at, this is the one that really surprised me, and this is new listings in the last 14 days. And what's remarkable about this, right, is not only the jump in listings that you see over maybe a month ago or so, right? I mean, that's like a pretty significant climb. If you're looking in that under 1 million category, we were probably at about 1,900. Now we're at about 2,350. I mean, that is a big jump in a month over the number of listings. The spring home selling season is here. But what I want you to look at, and that is particularly interesting, is looking at that number versus where we were at all points last year. And the fact is, for both under 1 million and the 1 to 2 million range, we have a lot more new listings coming on the market than we had at any point in the last year. So this is definitely sort of a new market. We have not seen that. Now, why do I think this is happening? I think we can come up with a lot of maybe even conspiracy theories, but the reality is I think there's a pretty simple reason. And I think that is that would-be move-up buyers, I think, are just tired of sitting on the sidelines. I think they have waited for interest rates to fall for years to make a move. They've had growing families. They've had maybe even changing jobs or changing commutes. And finally, I think we're seeing people collectively running out of patience. And that's why we're seeing more homes are actually hitting the market. Now, if we look at new escrows, we don't see quite the same commensurate jump. Things are definitely up, especially in that under 1 million category. Things are up a little bit in that 1 to 2 million category. But we're really trading at about the same number of new escrows as we were a year ago. And we're definitely not seeing the same highs that we're seeing. So the question is, when I go back and I look at that new inventory in the market, one of the things that we had happen over the last few years is this sort of caterpillar effect, right? So the new listings are the front end of the caterpillar; they move forward, and then the new escrows they end up coming up on the backside, right? As there's more to buy, we see that the buyers start making those purchases. I think we're going to see a little bit of that, but again, this may not look like a big difference between that under 1 million and that 1 to 2 million, but it is a big difference, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. So if we look at our absorption rate, right, like these are actually relatively low absorption rates compared to what we've seen over the last year. Why do I think that is? Well, I think we actually have a market that frankly is a bit healthier than it's been. I think we've had a market that we've been in this post-COVID sort of limited inventory market for so long that we don't even really know what a normal inventory market looks like. And I think we're starting to see that again. And really, that's not entirely unexpected. If you ever have an economic system where you see kind of a big shock to the system, right? COVID was a pretty big shock to the system. Those waves are going to ripple out for a little while until we get back to kind of a normal sort of equilibrium type mode. And I think that's what we're starting to see happening. If we look at our closed prices, remember, this is looking back a month. I think this is fascinating to me. And, when we look at that 71st percentile just jumping, we look at a pretty big jump there on the median home and then a little bit of a jump at that bottom end. I think that's going to tell you a little bit about maybe where the market was about a month ago. And I think that market a month ago was sort of in sort of a post-fire mode, maybe. The market going forward is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to talk about why that is. So if we look at our percent still active after 14 days in the market, that number is actually pretty good. And in fact, that's a better number than we've seen throughout most of last year. Still a little bit higher than we're at this point last year. I think when we're looking at that, and what does this tell us? This tells us a lot about the age of the inventory on the market, and it tells us a lot about, are we in a market maybe where we're seeing some constriction because there's not enough listings people want? Like there might be old crummy homes that people are not interested in buying. When I see this, I think that is a little bit of a part of it. So that increase in new homes hitting the market, I believe in about 2 weeks, we should start to see an increase in new escrows to be commensurate with that, but I don't think it's going to be even. And if we look at this close to list ratio, right? I mean, typically we do see kind of a bumpier activity in that 1 to 2 million. We see people being a little frothier. Those gyrations tend to be bigger than they do in that under 1 million category. And I want to take a second, I think, and excuse me. If we look at our days on market for new contracts, we see we've kind of settled around this 40-day mark. Again, that's actually still below a long-term average, but it's much closer to a normal number that we'd see. And honestly, it's not that much different than the number we saw a year ago. So, what is this stuff adding up to? I think we're seeing a real bifurcation of our market. I think in the LA area, it seems to be right around $1.5 million. And I'm going to tell you why when we get to the end. I don't want to spoil this because this is something that I've been thinking about for a little while that I think is going to explain a lot. If we move on to our three-way affordability chart, probably the most fascinating thing here, and I see we've got to move up our line for our payment index, but we notice that rent index has fallen back a little bit. And I think what we're seeing is that maybe some of those rent increases weren't entirely permanent that we saw in that post-fire environment. I think that rental market is calming down a little bit finally. And then we've got our prevailing mortgage rates. And that's really going to lead us into kind of our discussion of, are these macroeconomic factors starting to affect the housing market? I think they are, and I'm going to explain what we're seeing. So you see that national mortgage rate coming down. This graph doesn't tell the whole story. So this is a national measurement of 30-year fixed interest rates, right? That's what most people care about most of the time. There are some times when you shouldn't care as much about that, and we are in one of those times. Right now, there is a pretty significant discount for looking at, say, a 7-year ARM. So just to give an example, I just got this email this morning. On jumbo loans, the price spread between a 7-1 ARM or a 7-year, 6-month ARM, but basically fixed for 7 years loan, and a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at Wells Fargo, the difference between those was 5/8 of a percentage point to rate. So that's 0.625% to rate. That is a gigantic difference. I cannot even emphasize how big of a difference that is right now that we're seeing those shorter term interest rates are really taking a hit, or for the lenders, they're taking a hit. For buyers, they are dropping in a way that is very favorable. So this 30-year prevailing mortgage rate graph doesn't really tell the whole story. Okay, so let's talk about interest rates for a second. So if I were to map out some of the effects that we're seeing maybe on a national level, those macroeconomic effects, we've got a few, right? We got interest rates, that's one. We've also got, as maybe a second effect, that is the equity markets or the stock markets. What's been going on, the last week or maybe even 2 weeks. And then the third sort of macroeconomic effect is, I'd say there's a general feeling of uncertainty in the economy that maybe wasn't present a month ago or even 2 weeks ago, right? Wasn't even present. So we got those three effects. So let's break those down for a second. So the interest rate effect, where are we seeing the results of this? I think we're seeing this at the low end. So in the LA basin, there's a definite difference in the market at $1.5 million or so and below, and over $1.5 million. And so that sub $1.5 million market is dominated by people who are financing a higher percentage of those home prices, right? These are your high income first time home buyers. These are people who make good money, but maybe don't have a lot of savings, other reasons why. And they are much more interest rate sensitive. So we've seen that in the past, right? So they are seeing a bit of almost a boom coming up, right? Like we're seeing homes under $1.5 million. People are really going after that. Now, as we go over $1.5 million, what are we seeing? Well, a lot of those buyers have assets in other places, right? Like they're not just the home isn't the only thing that they've got, right? So maybe they're coming from another home, so they got some money in that house, but more often than not, they will often have equity holdings. Especially if these buyers are older, even if those are primarily retirement savings, you can see how significant equity stock market volatility could make those kind of buyers a little bit more scared, a little bit more afraid. Some of our tech workers, we have a lot of high tech workers here in Southern California. Many of them have a good portion of their long term compensation in stock options, restricted stock grants. So, to them, they look on a piece of paper and they suddenly have less money, right? That affects that 1.5 million and plus market. And I think until we've got maybe a little bit more clarity, I think some buyers in those price ranges are going to be a little bit more skittish. Now, what's the exception to that? Well, the exception is if you've got a home that's a one of one, architectural properties, ocean view properties, things like that, that are maybe less mainstream choices. If somebody likes what they see and it's the right house, I don't think you're going to see a huge difference in demand. However, if you are in a situation, for example, where you're just looking at just generally nice homes, like maybe flipped homes, homes that are just turnkey standard houses, I think those are going to feel a little soft because of those equity market volatility. Finally, now we've got whole market uncertainty. Now, in our locale, we don't have a huge number of federal employees. I don't think people are nearly as job worried in the Southern California basin. So I think that overall volatility isn't having an effect yet. So primarily, we're seeing the interest rate market dropping is having an increase in demand on the low end, and we've got those equity market volatility is causing a decreased demand on the high end. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this. You found it useful. We're all about helping people make better, more strategic and intentional decisions in real estate. So if that's the kind of real estate buyer or seller you would like to be, we would love to work with you. Or if you know someone who you think could benefit from our expertise, definitely pass them along. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And as always, questions and comments, we do love them. I do read them. I do respond to them. So keep those coming, and we'll see you again real soon.